I'm good.
It is already live.
Hello. Hello. If we could go ahead and get started. Hello, folks. Can we, if you could get your lunches quietly. I think pretty much everybody has a lunch now. And we can go ahead and get started. Just a tiny bit quieter. Okay, I think we now have critical mass and enough quiet. So welcome to the Working Group Chairs Forum for IETF 103. As a reminder, this is indeed an IETF event, so the note well still applies. The agenda for today is welcome, note well, and administrivia, and the following: RFC format update. Wes Hardiger is going to talk a little bit about the IETF Guides program, utility of milestone documents. You've seen a discussion on the Working Group Chairs list about that. A couple quick reminders from the Ombuds team and archiving strategy. Also, that was on the mailing list, and then open mic. So with that, I was about to say, where's Heather? But there she is, right there.
It's such an important update that apparently I get updated twice. It's an update. Okay, let's see. Can I make the thing happen? Look at that. I know. There you go. All right, and we're done. So I'm assuming that people do know that I've been working on changing the format of RFCs. That I know. Okay. Mostly because I just feel like it, you know. I was apparently bored for the last 6 years it's taken to get this far. If this actually is new to you, I'm very sorry for you. But we started this with a whole bunch of interesting project goals, and the project has been going on for almost as long as I've been RFC series editor. The goals of the project are to have XML as the unchanging underlying format. This is actually very common in the publishing industry. Most publishers do start with XML and then just transform it into whatever it needs to be transformed into. XML is very good about that. The outputs are plain text, which means not marked up, no links, that kind of thing. PDF A3, which is the archival target, the kind of things that I'll ship to the National Library of Sweden, the Computer History Museum, those folks that are our archival partners and can store our stuff properly. And HTML with a proper CSS file. SVG line art, black and white, not color, not grayscale, black and white, will be allowed, and non-ASCII characters will be allowed also. The reason I asked for some time today is because we've made a lot of progress on this, turning it from, hey, won't it be fun to talk about it in the community, to, no, really, we have tools that we're actively testing. And in fact, probably one of the most visible things that was just released last week is the HTML formatter. So for all those people that don't really care about the specification per se, they're not interested in how the specification turns into yet another text file, you're probably more interested in the HTML, what that looks like, what it behaves like, things like that. There are a couple things still in progress. Where it says prep tool, think ID knits. That's still being worked on, and PDF A3 output is also still being worked on. The goal is to have all the tooling done by the end of this year, whereas that means the developer will have it all code complete, and at that point it's in both community and RPC testing phases. So the HTML publication format, let's talk about that a little bit, because honestly, I expect that to be what most people end up looking at from day to day. If you would like to play with this, if you would like to see what this looks like against your drafts, the updated XML to RFC has been posted on the experimental page so that you too can be playing with this to your heart's content. And that is a screenshot of what the HTML format looks like on what I consider sort of a regular widescreen. This was my laptop with my browser open fairly wide. So now you're looking at not just the HTML version, you're also looking at the CSS that was designed several years ago to go along with it. That said, if you narrow the screen down quite a bit, you'll see the table of contents turns into a drop-down menu. The text is all reflowable. The usual sensible behavior that has been on the web for a really long time, we just haven't played catch-up yet. So all of that is fine and good and lovely, but there's still a couple details on how to get there from here. So in the RFC editor, we're looking at what it means to transition from V2, where we have essentially one input, one output, to V3, which for us is one input and a variety of outputs with a lot more features. We have several goals in the transition. We, of course, want to continue publishing things. That is kind of why we're here. We want to minimize the backlog, recognizing there will be a backlog during transition, because this is a lot of heavy lifting on the editor's side. We want to spend more time with the new format, making sure that the quality of what we're publishing is what everyone would expect. We do want to have a flag day where we cut over from V2 output to V3 output. We don't think having, a series of 10, 20, 30 RFCs where they're intermixed, some are purely V2, and don't have HTML, they don't have PDF A3 and other RFCs that do. Having that all mixed in sequence we don't think is a very good idea at all. And we also want to try and avoid having both V2 and V3 in Auth 48 at the same time. The RFC editor processes do change a bit. The database changes. The citation library adjusts a little bit as well. So there's, like I said, there's a lot of moving parts that we're considering, and there are goals to get right. There's different components to the transition for us. Of course, there's the operations and queue management, which is what I think a lot of you tend to see from day to day. There's the education, both internal and external, making sure that the staff themselves know how to be working on all of this, as well as making sure that the Auth 48 instructions are clear for how it's going to be going forward. And we're expecting a fair amount of IT support as people say, wait, what? How do you do this again? And being able to answer all of those questions. It's going to be a significant time sink, but pretty important.
So do you want questions in the middle or at the end or not at all?
Oh, well, now that's a trick question. Now is good.
Okay. On the previous slide, actually, I was just sort of wondering if it was a goal or a non-goal to avoid having a gap in numbers or a large gap in order to make the cutover work smoothly at a single point.
If there's a small gap, I won't lose sleep over it. I'm not interested in a large gap, so I wouldn't say I would want to go from whatever the latest one is now, or let's just say 8,500. I wouldn't want to jump from 8,500 to 10,000, or I don't think that's a good idea.
Michael Richardson. HTML looks beautiful. Sorry to disabuse you. I rarely look at HTML versions of draft myself. The most important thing turns out to be RFC diff, because I don't want to read it all again. And I guess we now have an XML diff that is going to be visible. And I guess I think that whatever you would like to do to make that more available sooner would probably make people very happy to say, why can't I be in the V3 process already? That's just my comment. I saw that it was there. Yeah, RFC XML diff. So it's out there.
That's the word I'm looking for. It's released. You can look at it. You can play with it.
Okay.
And you can
I
give
can run
feedback.
it locally.
Yes, and you can. Yes, I believe so. And you can also talk to Jim, I saw him somewhere coming into the room. He's over there. Oh, or you can also just talk to Jim because he offered it.
And Robert's on the mic.
Right,
waiting.
yeah. Go ahead, Robert.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I did just want to let you know that we did have some remote folks, and I was wondering who asked the first question, who was up in front of Michael Richardson?
Benjamin.
All right, thanks.
Pascal Dubert here. I tend to consume more and more the product of your work on my phone as opposed to on a PC. And well, the text forms, it's completely unreadable. It gets cut in the middle of nothing. The HTML is not too good either. I end up using the PDF.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wonder, as you rework the HTML, if you could take some care about visualization tools which would not be PCs or large screens, and see how the result works on phones.
Yes, that's absolutely something that has been taken into account, such that as you resize the screens, as you change that, it should still look good and be readable and reflowable.
Fantastic.
Okay, so what does this mean for you as working group chairs, as people who assign document shepherds, as you work with authors? Because what we're looking at is we're expecting this to really start. We're looking at production in 6 to 9 months. That means a lot of the drafts that you're working on now are going to be impacted by this, and we need your help. These are a series of quotes, prizes to people who can identify all of them. Using XML, using SVG, that offers you so much more flexibility and power in what you do in the documents than you've had before. We, the RFC editor, cannot fix everything that you might do. Today, We know that it's quite possible to do, if you don't know how to do tables, if you find the tables too hard, you just put them in artwork and say, yeah, it's just artwork. And it's going to output into, something that looks like a typewriter written table, and you've all been fine with that. You can't do that anymore. And we're really going to rely on you for assistance to make sure that semantically incorrect things aren't done. We're going to try and capture them in the tooling as much as we can, but we need your help making sure that this stuff is sane. Should I finish this slide, Michael, or do you want to? Okay.
Yeah.
And that goes into the second item. Let me reemphasize. We need your help in the review. There's going to be a lot of changes, a lot of how does this read for you? How does it look for you? Did this transform the way that you expected it to? And the editors will need your help with that. And again, this is something that we're starting to look at come down the road pretty soon now, and will impact the drafts that you probably are working on today. Michael?
I had two questions. So the first is about SVG. So at one point I had a draft and someone said, hey, you should try it with the SVG because you have this beautiful picture in it. It was even in SVG. And then we realized the whole point of using SVG was so that we could color the boxes differently so that we could see them. And I went, oh, okay, that didn't work. So we did it in ASCII, and that we went back to there. The question is whether cross-hatching of some kind is welcome in SVGs to essentially, we can't grayscale it, but can we put patterns in things? Is that welcome or undesirable?
That would actually be fine.
Okay.
I mean, the main reason we said absolutely no to color is from a publisher perspective, color is insanely difficult and requires a whole new level of training, a whole new level of expectation. And given our readership, color is just a problem.
I totally understand. So the other question I have is I'm trying to understand. So I have a working group author, uploads XML to the data tracker. Is there now or will there be a way for us to see how that would transform to PDFA, for instance, long before you see the document, so that we could actually make a decision in the working group, whoa, that table-y thing artwork that you did really has to be a table or something else. Is that coming, or that's just, I haven't seen it yet, or? Okay, to be honest, I've assumed that would be part of it. Okay.
I don't think I've ever explicitly heard that it would be part of what people see in the data tracker.
Okay, so it may for initially be the case that working group chairs may have to pull down XML and run it through the tool chain somehow to see whether it's going to look. And it sounds like the transition you're telling me, it sounds to me like it's going to happen within the next 6 to 10 months. And so if we have a document that is in O2 and we expect to go to working group last call next summer, it's probably going to wind up in the new thing, and we should probably get that done now rather than at the end of the process.
Probably
what I'm
a
thinking.
good idea. Yeah.
Alyssa Cooper, I just wanted to make sure I understood something you said. When you're talking about if you have a complicated table, then often tell people to put it in artwork instead right now. But then with the new format, you can't do that. Is there a reason you can't put a table in SVG?
You could.
Draw a table? Okay.
I don't necessarily know that it would be a good idea, because I think there's still a lot of concern about how SVG would display in the plain text. And so if it would end up being, no, you really need to look at the HTML for this. Yeah, I guess it could work. It just doesn't seem like how it should work. Okay, Jim is shaking his head, so I'm gonna also let him chime in on this shortly.
Well, I also asked because I had a conversation earlier this week with someone about putting a Yang tree model in SVG. So I'm just kind of. Well, or you can have nasty line breaks. So anyway, that's why we were talking about it. But yeah, I'm just interested to understand what is being anticipated as far as what goes in SVG.
Okay.
In order to be an end run around the rest of the content of the document.
Hold that thought.
Andy Malice. Continuing on SVG, are you going to be recommending any particular SVG creation tools?
Yes.
Okay. And when will you tell us what they are?
Probably the one that we have the most experience with right now is Inkscape.
Okay.
There may be others. I actually am interested in hearing from the community what they find useful and how it works.
Okay. And to answer your challenge, I think it's Spider-Man, Helen Keller, and Casablanca.
I'll buy you a drink later, Andy.
Jim Shad. Yeah, actually was. First of all, for Alyssa's thing, you can put ASCII art in today. And if, point of fact, if you want, or in the new V3 format, if in point of fact you want to actually get that artwork displayed in a text file, you will need to do both the SVG and some sort of ASCII version as well, because SVG will not render at all into text. Now, the reason I actually got up here. I'm starting a new document and I want to be really foolish. I can upload an HTML file, I can upload a text file that I generate from XML to RFC. Is there any reason why I should not do that?
Just in the XML.
Not upload the XML. Until the data traffic gets fixed, it will not be able to process the XML.
But, uploading the HTML.
But I can load up the .txt file and the .html file.
I can't think of any reason not to. I mean, I would look at the virtual Robert to sanity check me on that, but that seems like a sane idea to me.
David Black, I wanted to ask about Auth48 transition, as I think I saw a note in a previous slide that said you didn't want to run the Auth48 on both formats at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Working group chairs know that 48 hours is a goal. Sometimes we meet it, and sometimes it means 48 days, and it's still counting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, you got it. I heard 48 weeks here. What are your plans to deal with an Auth48 in the old format that's badly overrunning because it's coming your way?
We do know something like that's going to happen. We're going to look to a certain amount of working group chair help to say, okay, make this go faster, make this move because we want this out of queue. If necessary, we can discuss having the editors help shift this from a V2 thing to a V3 thing. That may certainly be a possibility for some things.
I would suggest making contingency plans along the lines you just discussed, that when push comes to shove, there may be an Auth48 that's got to go back up and go forward in the new format.
Fair enough.
Barbara Stark, yeah, along that line, I mean, one of the main reasons I see things kind of hanging out in the queue is waiting for a reference.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for a fact that we've got some things hanging around waiting for a reference that's right now, in working group last call and,
Yeah, misref is sort of a separate kettle of newts. And we're not going to try and clear out misref as part of this concern. If it's in misref and we go from V2 to V3, then what comes in will convert to V3 once it's released from misref.
And 6 to 9 months is kind of a big range. Do we have any time frame for when we think there will be a narrower time frame?
Ask me in March. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I mean, when I first looked at this project, I was thinking it was a 2 to 3 year project. So I have no confidence in my dates at all. So 6 to 9 months is about as narrow as I'm going to be able to do at this point.
And I guess there's going to be a full set of tools available to go along with this.
Yes.
And that will be available.
Well, the tools should be done and released by the end of this year. It's all the rest of it, the education, the testing to make sure there's no fatal bugs, the things. That's what's feeding into the 6 to 9 months component.
Okay.
Jim Shaw. Actually, Robert may be wanting to say the same thing that I am. All the tools are actually up, and you can download them with pip and start using them today.
Go ahead,
Well, all the
Robert.
ones that are available.
So I was actually going to respond to Jim's question when he was at the mic before on uploading the text or HTML or even PDF versions of the draft when you don't have it, the version of the XML that the data tracker can ingest and automatically convert for you. Sure, there's no problem in doing that, but I suspect by the time we get to the point where you would want to, we will have changed the submit interface on the data tracker to be aware of whether or not you're submitting V2 or V3 XML, and the problem, the state that you're worried about won't exist for very long.
Rick Taylor. On the SVG subject, I've done a little playing with SVG over the years. It's a fantastic tool. It's brilliant. I mean, you can embed JavaScript, you can do dynamic transitions and animations, and it's all valid SVG.
Is it valid tiny SVG?
That was my question. You're specifying tiny profile, are you?
We started with tiny profile and made it tighter. There is an SVG spec out there that for us.
Super. Thank you. Part two, Yang tree models. Every single working group is going to go, oh, how do I format my Yang tree models? Is this ASCII art? Do I do it in SVG? Can we have a definitive statement or maybe even a tool to just make your lives easier before you get yet another sort of hand-sketched Yang tree model or a...
I would like that. I don't feel qualified to demand that of the community. So this is a good idea, and I want to talk to the community about, okay, well, which one is right? I don't know, but it's definitely good feedback.
Is Benoit here?
I didn't see him.
Chair, author of free diagram RFC.
Mike?
I work with my co-chair. Co-author.
The response from the back of the room for people who are remote is that that was Lou Berger saying NetMod chair, he would be working with his co-chair to figure out what to do.
Carsten Morgan, yeah, I understand that everybody has Yang tree models on their mind. There are about 50 other things that you want to generate SVG from, or even just the source text or whatever. So most of us actually have tool chains that generate what you get to see. And of course, these tool chains also need to migrate. And one aspect of migrating is just getting them to work with V3, which I think will be easy. But the other interesting part is actually making use of the capabilities in a good way. So for instance, anybody who has ever sent a packet uses MSC Gen to make figures. But if there is a canonical way to put MSC Gen type input into authoring schemes, then we probably should agree on how to do that so that two different authors that come together to write something actually can write MSC Gen that the other guy can also process and so on. So there's a lot of infrastructure on the authoring side that we have to invent in the next year or so. The reason I came up here is just to point out there is one focal point for doing that development, which is the RFC Markdown mailing list. And it's not just about Markdown, it's actually about the authoring chain. And I expect that people will post experiences with their favorite authoring chains for generating SVG, for generating Markdown on that mailing list. And I would ask people who want to participate in that and want to have nicer RFCs in a year or so from now to join that mailing list and join the discussion. Thank you.
I would encourage that as well, because RFC editor can't dictate authoring tools. That's going to have to come out of the community. And I really want it to come out of the community. I want this to happen. I think the authoring tools are very important, but you all need to do that.
Ron Gondwana, I don't actually have a question. I just wanted to say thank you for taking this project on. It's a huge project, and on behalf of everyone who has to read these things, I really appreciate anything that makes them better.
Thank you.
Mosinati, does the XML format allow selective inclusion of either SVG or ASCII art fallback, depending on the conversion tool's target output, so that you can get SVG if the target is HTML, or you get ASCII art if the target is text? Is that supported in the XML format or no?
I don't know if it's explicit. It is. Is it exported that way? I mean, I guess that would be part of the.
That's
All right.
supported.
Yes.
Is that mandated, or is that something that chairs should start mandating authors to support? Because it seems like there's a lot of text-only viewers, and if a lot of the content just doesn't get rendered at all because it's SVG, it seems like a problem for consuming those documents.
I do think it is an interesting challenge for consuming the documents. One of the things that when I was first putting this idea together is to just put in there a note saying, if you want to see this diagram, you have to go over there. In some cases, that may be fine because it may be purely example and not necessarily the text. In other cases, you're right. I think that's terrible. But I don't see a way around it.
And maybe less strong than mandating. Maybe we can have like a hackathon tool that would generate, try to scrape SVG and generate ASCII art as best as possible. Maybe even reverse, take existing ASCII art XML drafts and try to SVG them. That seems like maybe a viable.
I think there are things that take ASCII art and turn them into
Yeah.
SVG now. Yeah, I don't know anything that goes the other direction because, but I know there's ASCII to SVG out there.
All right, thank you, Heather. Is Wes, I don't see what, I can't see if, there he is.
All right, I'm here to talk about the IETF Guides program. Hopefully I'm covering what Karen wanted me to cover. We'll find out. So a couple of quick things. First of all, I'm going to give a brief introduction on what it is and then tell you sort of the changes that have occurred somewhat recently in the last year or two. But the purpose of the IETF Guides program is to really introduce newcomers to the IETF in a gentle, graceful, friendly kind of way. And importantly, to encourage participation. One of the things, if you were like me when you joined the IETF, you probably didn't speak for a while. You probably didn't interact much for a while. So we're trying to increase that participation at a quicker rate and to educate people about how the IETF works, how the IETF process works, and how the IETF culture works, because as you know, we're a little different than many other organizations. So this program really consists of, and I should mention, I am one of the co-chairs. I've never really called it co-leader. We don't have a really good title. Me and Niels Tenover is the other one. We've taken on, we dual purpose the role. So it consists of really two parts. It consists of the IETF Guides, that used to be called the mentoring program. It used to be called IETF Mentors. We received feedback that mentors, the new participants were expecting a whole lot more, almost to be handheld through all of the working groups. So we changed the name This IETF to Guides, just to give them a better sense of a resource they could go to. And the Guides program is really sort of a one-on-one kind of assigned help and early introduction. Most guides meet with their partner newcomer on Sunday and give them an introduction about how the IETF works, how internet drafts work, all that kind of stuff, answer any sort of questions. And it's really somebody to greet you face to face. We try and partner people that can arrive on near the same day before the IETF starts. The other half of the program is the Quick Connections, which you may or may not have heard of. It runs every Sunday night, and it's sort of like if you took speed dating and you crossed it with the IETF Guides program, you end up with Quick Connections. It's an hour-long session that occurs right before the newcomers meet and greet, which you guys are aware of. And we rotate people currently we have it set for every 6 minutes, so they get an introduction to meet lots of new people, lots of people that have long experienced the IETF and may have some valuable wisdom to pass on.
And again, that's an introduction, sort of the same sort of topics, how the IETF works, topics of interest to various people, as well as how the IETF culture is actually quite different. And, you know, we tell things like, read the drafts, read the drafts ahead of time. Understand that people yell at microphones and things like that. So last thing is really, so what do we need? You know, why am I here in the first place? To introduce you to the changes, where it's now called guides. We need volunteers, and, you know, to be perfectly honest, the working group chairs are perfect candidates for volunteering. We always get more signups than we do guides. We often pair a couple of people that are willing with multiple people, but the reality is it doesn't take that much time. You get to meet new people in the process, and you really get to increase participation. We try and match people with both language and where they're from, as well as topics of interest. It's not possible 100% of the time. But if we want the IETF to succeed, right, if we want to keep pushing new documents and new paths forward, we've got to get participation increasing. Otherwise, if we don't get newcomers coming in and actively participating, eventually this organization will go away. We also need, and so this is my plea to all of you, we really need to create a positive environment in every working group so people are encouraged to participate. And it's not easy. You know, many of us have been around for many years, and the reality is in fact, I'm late to this meeting because of newcomers talking to me about how they have a hard time approaching some working groups and helping. They either don't know what to do, they're too scared to participate when they see, you know, senior veterans having vigorous discussions at microphones. You may hear more about that from me tonight at the plenary, because it turns out that, you know, especially in some groups, it's a real problem. So the best thing that you can do is even just at the end of the meeting, say, are there any newcomers that wish to participate? Because they don't even know that reviewing a draft is so important, right? They don't know that even finding grammatical and you know, edits and things like that is incredibly valuable. And so I had people come up to me, I don't know how to get started. So I'd suggest, you know, being able to ask, are there any newcomers that, you know, wish to participate, and then tell them where work is needed. You guys are the experts there. You know which drafts are in review, which drafts are, you know, need the most attention right now, which ones don't have enough editors, which ones don't have enough people contributing texts and ideas. There's actually a whole bunch of people that want to help. They just don't know how. I think that is it. Any questions, or did I miss anything?
No, you got it, but I think we have a question coming.
More of a comment just occurred to me. In TSVWG, we have David Black. In TSVWG, we've taken to putting up a slide that said, please review documents. I think it comes very shortly after the Note Well slide. Let me suggest that we produce a version of the Note Well deck that contains a Note Well slide plus a please review slide that includes a little bit of encouragement to newcomers, and then we can just all start using that everywhere.
Yeah, I think that encouragement to newcomers is the key, right? Because a lot of times the newcomers look at that, you know, please review these documents, and they're like, well, I'm not expert enough to review it. And they don't realize that any perspective is going to be helpful.
Right. And if that were part of the standard Note Well slides, you'll probably find that please review, and newcomers especially encouraged, getting used by default in a lot of working groups.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of help to be had if you just reach out and find them. So, all right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Adam?
Thanks. And just a couple of administrative things. The first, how long do you expect this to take? How long do I have?
5 or so, 5 to 10 minutes.
So pretty fast. Okay. Yeah. And then the second is these are minuted, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Okay. I wanted to get some feedback from working group chairs about working group milestones and dates, and the utility of the dates in particular. So this is the thing. Okay. So go ahead and feel free to hop up the microphone as soon as you see something you want to talk about. The first question is, what value do the milestones serve? This is actually feedback we got on the working group chairs list. It's, you know, so it's a list of deliverables. It's a tool for the chairs to use to manage the working group. It's a mechanism for communication between the chairs and the area director to say what things are supposed to be coming out. These are apparently uncontroversial enough that everyone's still sitting. So what value do the dates themselves serve? So one of the things that's been pointed out is that external entities, might use these for planning, although in practice, they probably learn pretty quickly that they shouldn't. Just the fact that most of our milestones end up getting pretty quickly out of date and aren't really kept up to date after that. I have had an area director say that they have successfully used them in at least one case to drive working group progress, to actually check in with the chairs and ask, are you on track to make this date? So apparently they can be used for that. It's probably more the exception than the rule. So this one I actually want people to stand up and talk about, if anyone cares. So do having inaccurate dates in the tracker cause harm? So one might presume that any external entities that rely on them, like SDOs, governmental entities, might be harmed by this in some way. And it is kind of embarrassing for the IETF, I think, at least. Okay, go.
Barbara Stark. So as someone who works in a lot of places that are not the IETF, other organizations, my input is everybody has the same issue out there. It does not cause harm to the reputation of the IETF, in my opinion. It can cause issues for those external entities, and in my opinion, that's sort of their problem. If they're really interested in it, there are ways of more closely tracking, just go look at the working group. It's online, it's public. Look at the state the document is in that you're interested in. Now, with that said, in other organizations, we tend to use more quarterly deliverables as opposed to dates.
Okay, thanks.
That sounded, Bron Gondwana, that sounded like an argument for being more fuzzy with the dates, but still for dates. My position on dates is they're kind of like democracy. They're better than the alternatives. It doesn't mean they're great. But the alternative of not having anything to measure yourself against at all, I think would be significantly worse than having some kind of expectation and then being able to compare against that expectation later to say, are we on track to what we expected or are we wildly out? That's better than not having any milestones at all.
Okay, thanks.
David Skenazy. So I became a working group chair a little over a year ago, and when I did so the DNSSD is a working group, the milestones were all in the past. And some of them, it was easy. I could say, oh, that's done, check. Ooh, the other one was, I should put a date that's not negative on here, but I don't know what to put. So I'll deal with this tomorrow. It's been a year. I still haven't done it. So they're just further in the past now. And I don't really feel a motivation to do it because I haven't, maybe perhaps because they're all in the past, had anyone rely on these or use them for anything. So in my personal experience, I just kind of ignore them.
Okay, thanks.
Justin Dean. I have had similar experience with falling behind on certain draft states or drafts that aren't getting a lot of action. And I imagine a lot of you are like me, where you're not always working on IETF stuff, and then it just kind of fades in the background. I would really like the data tracker to be able to set it up so to send me updates at my discretion. If I say it's going to be in this state for 2 weeks, send me an email in 2 weeks, remind me, and then keep sending me that email until I take care of it. I think that would be an automatic motivation for me to remind myself, hey, this is still there and I need to get it done, instead of having to proactively go to the data tracker and look at what I have to do and figure out what it is. And I think that would help a lot in terms of automatically getting people to update themselves.
Thank you. That's very insightful.
Just a small maybe cosmetic comment. Milestones appear like carved in stone, unmovable, real. What about renaming this into roadmap or something more fluffy?
Okay, yeah.
Ben Campbell speaking as an individual. There's effort in creating the dates. For a few people, there's effort in maintaining the dates, obviously not for everybody. Effort for no purpose is harm. And then the second one, just from a personal perspective, is when I've been a working group chair and I was responsible for a whole bunch of dates that were out, I found it stressful. I didn't do much about it, but I kind of found it vaguely embarrassing. And my general viewpoint there is, if we're not getting a lot of utility out of them, publishing incorrect information is a negative. I don't know if I would qualify as harm, but it's a negative. And it would be better to not publish them if we're going to publish incorrect information. If we're going to make something useful out of them or change them into something fuzzier where calling them correct or incorrect is a little bit unclear, that's probably fine. But just putting dates out there that no one cares about, everyone knows that are wrong, it seems like a waste of bits.
Heather Flanagan, individual contributor. I partly agree with Ben. Bad data is worse than no data. From someone who often works with implementers and people who don't go to IETF meetings, having something there, either in a roadmap style or dates, is actually helpful for them to know, okay, is this being worked on? Can I expect anything coming out of this anytime soon? And they don't necessarily have time to sift through an entire mailing list for that. They're not here to develop the standards. They're here to purely to consume it. And I do think that keeping in mind implementers who are not standards developers is kind of an important reason why we're here.
Thanks.
I just want to do a really quick check. So you have two more questions beyond this one?
I do, yeah.
So y'all might want to talk really fast.
Okay, Kent Watson. I think it should be on a per working group basis, so if any data is provided, and also the granularity of the date. It could be Q1 2019, first half of 2019, anytime in 2019.
Ah, okay.
Martin Vigoureux. The fact that a milestone refers to a date which is back in the past doesn't mean that the milestone is useless. I think it means that it was either badly set or that the working group is late.
Ben Kadek, I think Kent just said this, but the explicit point of having an option for a working group to have milestones with no dates is probably worthwhile.
Okay.
Rick Taylor, dates can be beneficial, even when you blast past them, to be able to turn around to the working group and say, look, 2 years ago, we said we'd have this done. Come on, let's get that review. You can use it as a carrot as well as a stick.
Carsten, some of the utility is actually in the relative information that a milestone list gives you. So somebody is trying to do this first and the other thing next. So I think that's an important utility I wouldn't want to lose when looking at another working group. The reputational damage we get from not being able to keep our promises. And whether we publish these promises in a milestone list or in an email to another SDO that says this will be done by the end of this year doesn't make a difference. We need to get better in meeting our promises. And finally, if we working group chairs were being managed, somebody would sit down with us at every IETF meeting and go through this milestone list for 3 minutes and manage us.
This crowd doesn't appreciate being managed.
Barbara Stark. In addition to quarterly, one other thing I wanted to say was, in other organizations, we generally update our dates every face-to-face meeting. It is leaders simply, as a matter of course, to keep the information relevant, just update it at every face-to-face meeting.
And who does that?
Huh?
Which group does that?
The project leads,
Okay, but this is one of the working groups
which
in the
in
IETF?
this case would be a working group chair.
Okay.
Would just go in and, at the working group, say, what are your new dates?
Okay.
Bron Gondwana again. You heard from the room how much this room appreciates the idea of being held accountable to anything. But I would argue that a bad plan is better than no plan. Maybe bad data is worse than no data, but a bad plan is better than no plan. And that these dates are a plan and they're documentation of a plan and some kind of accountability. And to take them away because we're not being accountable is kind of the opposite of a goal. It's throwing your hands up and saying, well, we're incapable of doing it, so let's not try. And I disagree with that. We're better off, as that argument said, updating our milestones. If there are milestones in the past that we haven't hit, then that is a time for the working group chairs and the working group to look at it and set new milestones, not to say we can't put dates on milestones.
Okay, Robert?
Just very slightly off topic, since people have got this in their heads right now, it might be a good time to jump to the data tracker and look at the status report for your working group, or the page of status reports for all working groups, and see how well those are maintained as well.
Okay, thanks. So this slide actually has been, I think, commented on, just we winged it in all the other conversations. It was suggested that maybe we have low resolution or have active management, for example, once every IETF meeting, going through the milestones and pushing them forward, either as part of the working group or with your area director. So I'll go ahead and skip on to the next one. We did kind of cover, would it hurt to remove dates? That was commented on a couple of times, but if anyone has any other points they'd want to make along the lines of, would this, like, what would be the harm of removing them beyond I heard lack of accountability being a concern. And this would, we sort of go through, having things in order to have an idea of what the priority of things are relative to each other being valuable.
I think there's actually a little bit of information also that if there's some item is in 3 months away, it's probably very quick. Even if it was put 3 months in forward, like when it's put, and if the other one is put 2 years in forward, that it's big, even hard issue that requires time. So how much is you have been working on some item is actually also how much further away we put some item is also important.
So indication of task complexity. That's a good point. Thanks.
David Skenazy, from the previous comments from everyone in the room, it sounds like we don't all use the milestones the same way, and we don't all agree on how to use them or how important the dates are. So maybe having the option for some people to have dates, some people to not have dates, some people to have thinner granularity might be a way forward that works for everyone. It wouldn't be the same in all working groups. That could be a bad thing, but maybe that's the sweet spot.
Okay. All right, so I think we actually got into pretty much everything that I wanted to get to on that first slide, because we winged the rest of the other slides. So thank you very much for the input. I'll be trying to sort of synthesize this into a concrete proposal and taking it to the working group chairs list in a bit. Thanks.
Thank you. Pete?
Howdy, folks. So I come up here because there have been some things that have come up on the Ombuds team recently, and I thought it would be useful to remind you that there are certain things we don't want to do, and certain things that you can do to help that don't involve us. So you have a lot of levers to pull when someone's being a jerk in the context of a working group. You can always take the mic away from someone. You can always ban them from a mailing list. Those are extreme, but you can also, as chair, say, hey, stop that, you're being a jerk. This is useful both from the keeping the working group moving along and getting their work done, but also from other participants who we were just talking about, newcomers, who might be put off by someone being a jerk, even if they are not the direct target of that jerkiness. We are, as an Ombuds team, glad to help out if you need some advice on how to do so. We are glad to intervene if it gets personal, but we kind of separate if someone's interfering in the working group process in public, that's a chair thing to handle. If someone's doing something interpersonally, especially off list, that's definitely an Ombuds team thing to handle. So we're kind of hoping that we can encourage you to keep an eye out for people getting a little hostile on lists and start doing a little proactive, helping them to be calmer. Anybody got concerns or questions about doing that kind of stuff? Cool, easy.
Okay, so the next one on the list is archiving strategy, and I just put all up here. I know that there was a conversation started on the mailing list, and a couple other issues have come up related to this. And so my question for discussion is there such a thing as archiving too much? What do we need to archive and what do we not need to archive? And in particular, I was curious about, for example, recordings associated with virtual interims, because they're currently recorded in a number of different tools. So I meant to look up who started the conversation on the mailing list, and I don't remember who it was, so I was hoping that we could just have a short conversation on what we thought about archiving and is there such a thing as too much?
Barbara Stark, I wasn't the person who started it, but I was really glad it was started because I had exactly the same question. I just hadn't asked it. And that is with their interim calls, we have these, you know, on the instructions, it says, chair, remember to hit that record button. It's there and it's in the template of the minutes and it's like, hit that record button. And it's like, okay, I hit that button. I have a recording. And now what?
So that's if you're using the WebEx, can you hit the red button so that Robert can speak whenever he wants, since I'm over here now? So, sorry, a different red button. But all virtual interims are not using the same WebEx tools, right? You're talking about the WebEx tool provided by
IETF.
By IETF, yeah. Okay. Robert, were you going to answer something related to that?
No, I had a statement I was going to make.
Okay. Well, then I'll put you behind Michael.
Michael Richardson. So until recently, the WebEx recordings required some Windows program to play them back and convert them. And I tried this once. It was like a 3-day long thing to transcribe an hour-long meeting. And it just seemed useless to me because it was basically because it needed to coordinate all the who said what and this input and that input. And I sort of like, wow. Now my impression is they come out as MPEG video. But maybe I'm wrong.
Okay. Alexa is shaking her head.
She's shaking her hand. I thought I saw it was MPEG or something.
Well, at least when I recently tried, you can convert them, but it still requires a Windows machine.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Is there now? Well, that's
So-
nice to know. But the point is that they
Yeah, I hate to do
yeah.
this to
So
you all, but
yeah,
microphone,
Adam just said
please.
there's now a command line tool to do it. So conceivably we can spin up the cloud and get it to do this for us. But until without that kind of thing, my feeling is they're completely useless.
Well-
Okay. But there's two other points. You can't hit the record button unless you have the Java version running on your desktop. So if you're leading something from something not a Windows computer, you can't even start the recording.
Mhm.
If you decide to have a virtual interim with something a little more stable than WebEx, then you may or may not have archiving or recording either. So my take is that this stuff is interesting and useful for the chairs for the next 3 weeks to get some notes made.
Right.
And afterwards are probably useless for the thing. We need probably a 2-page summary or draft minutes, and that's way better from an Etherpad in my opinion.
Okay.
Okay.
Robert, you're
So
up.
that dovetails nicely into what I was going to suggest. Even for the working group sessions at the plenary meetings that we have right now, we're keeping the recordings forever. And I would propose that is a mistake and is in fact putting us organizationally at more risk than a lot of us would believe. And we should consider putting a timeout on how long we keep recordings. There is benefit to having the recording around for some period of time. I don't know if that's 6 months, I don't know if that's 2 years, whatever that is, to make sure that we can follow up and get the work done while the recording is still timely relevant. And but past that point, the minute should be good enough to serve the purpose. And we don't want to leave ourselves in a position where we run ourselves afoul later of some new variant of the right to be forgotten laws that causes massive amounts of scrambles to go destroy or edit or whatever these huge data sets that we've gathered.
Okay, Barbara?
Barbara Stark. And so one thing that you might consider is the download I'm talking about is the draft of the interim meeting minutes or agenda.
Mhm.
And in the draft agenda, it says hit the button. If that were removed, that would cause a lot less confusion if there's nothing being done with the recording so if just the sentence of remember to hit that recording button were removed, that would be useful.
Go ahead, Lou.
Lou Berger. I think I just heard Robert say we shouldn't keep recordings of our sessions indefinitely. If I heard that correctly, I would like to disagree with it. If I misheard what he said, I apologize for coming to the mic.
Okay. Robert, so he might get back in the queue. I'm sticking myself in the queue with apologies. I think, especially for the virtual interims, that we're keeping a lot of stuff. And I would switch over to like the newcomers. Like we do 2 newcomer webinars plus a newcomers tutorial at every single IETF. And so now we have, 3 times 9 recordings for the year of basically the same material. So I just think perhaps we should keep less. Go ahead, Robert.
I was just going to respond to Lou that no, you did hear me correctly. I was proposing that there be a timeout, a place where recordings expired. And I am fine that you disagree. I'm not insisting that this is the right thing to do, but I do think that we should, as a community, consider it.
Yeah. Okay, so Lou again, responding to both comments. I think a discussion is perfectly reasonable to have.
Right.
I'm talking specifically about working group sessions,
Right.
Not about edu but things that are used in producing our documents. I think it's important to keep.
So then you have design teams meetings that might be recorded, and then you have virtual interims, and then you have the full sessions. And so where do we draw the line?
So we have working group sessions, and we have a process that defines what is part of permanent records and what is not.
Right.
For example, design teams are not.
Okay.
But we have a definition of those things already.
I need to cut the queue, so the 2 of you, and then we'll be done.
Yeah, Carsten Burman. I just want to report that the moment that Robert said we should start deleting things, my brain recorded I have another thing to do after each IETF, which is download the videos. Sorry, but this is exactly how I work, and I just want to report that.
Okay.
I'm going to agree with Lou. I think it's, at least for the working groups, a pretty bad idea to delete the recordings and just keep minutes, because minutes often have errors in them. And I've used recordings multiple times in the past to clarify what was in the minutes and correct them and update them, because people in the past had differed in opinions about what was said, and the recordings were the definitive proof of what was said.
Okay. I mean, this is obviously not the group that can resolve this question, but we wanted some feedback to take it to those who can. With that, it's actually 1:38. We're 3 minutes past time, so I'm going to, we can take the open mic session to the mailing list. Please take your lunches with you and clear the room expeditiously so the next set of people can get in here.
Oh, yeah, sure. I do,
Hey, yeah, I know.
Try not to stab anyone.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, it doesn't. Oh, yeah, now it has to be. But it doesn't have to be a transcription, it just has to be. I don't care who exactly says everything. So, there you have it. I don't know, I've had so many talking. It's almost like a bunch of